Hi everyone, today I'll be sharing on harmonization ruling and how it affect you as a buyer or a seller. So most of the time now, a lot of agents will be telling you to buy into harmonized projects because harmonized projects, they don't factor in the aircon latch anymore. The calculation is better in terms of the space and all. But what truly matters and what is the most important thing is to understand how does this space efficiency actually helps you in terms of the purchase and whether or not today this pricing of a harmonized project, does it make sense to you? Because we want to understand clearly some of the projects, even though it's harmonized, it may not be the best, and some pre-harmonized projects may be even better. So today, clearly we want to understand first, how does this space helps you and how does this price point that you enter make sense in today's market? So today what I'll be touching on is how did the harmonization ruling actually change the market? First thing first, we want to understand, will your property be affected by this ruling? What I want to bring across to you over here is that because in a certain estate nowadays, there are some projects that are pre-harmonized while some projects are post-harmonized. So we want to know whether or not these post-harmonized projects will affect you as a pre-harmonized owner in the surrounding estate. And next we want to talk about also is the usability of the space in the harmonized projects, because the way that they calculate in terms of the sizes are a bit different. We want to know whether or not new harmonized projects, does it really make sense into entering? Does it really gives you a better livable area in terms of the overall square feet? So the next point we want to talk about is the strong performance done by the post-harmonized projects. So if you know, the first project that was harmonized and was launched was Lentor Mansion, and on the launch day itself, it actually hits a 75% sales. And also it brings to the last point I want to talk about is that even though some of the harmonized projects, they are at a higher PSF, but their quantum is actually much lower. So in the reality, when you look at a resale property, for example, today as a buyer, end of the day, a lot of buyers still based on the overall quantum that they buy a property and not so much about just the PSF. Because if the price is something that they can accept within their budget, they will still consider and not look so much at the PSF. So these are the points that we want to clearly run through today to understand whether or not should you buy a harmonized project or should you be holding on to your pre-harmonized project. All these little factors will determine what should you be doing with your current property. And now the first example that I'll be using would be Tembusu Grand versus Emerald of Katong. So why I use these two examples is because they are firstly side by side. Secondly, Tembusu Grand is a pre-harmonized project, while Emerald of Katong is a post-harmonized project. So now in the market, a lot of buyers will know that harmonized means that they don't factor in the aircon ledges. And also because they take the distance from the middle of the wall to the other middle of the wall to actually calculate the whole size of the unit itself. But what we want to really understand is how does this layout efficiency actually benefits you in terms of the purchase. And one more thing we can clearly see between these two layouts, Emerald of Katong and Tembusu Grand, they are both 2 bedrooms, 743 square feet versus 678 square feet. The biggest difference is only just the size of 65 square feet difference. But what we want to really understand is still to go in detail into the measurements of the specific unit to know where are the differences in terms of the both layouts. So we can see clearly from the breakdown of these units, if you look at Tembusu Grand versus Emerald of Katong, the main key difference is just the aircon latch at 3 square meter, which is where you find that the difference in terms of the sizing. And in the past, we actually will pay for just this extra 3 square meter of space. But what we really want to understand is, will this 3 square meter make a difference in terms of your livable area? So we look clearly at the whole overall layout. The living room is 27 and 23 respectively. If you can see, there's a 4 square meter difference, but it doesn't mean that a 27 square meter living room bigger means that it's really better. What we want to understand is the real deep down measurement of the particular unit or the particular bedroom so that we know whether or not is it acceptable in the market by buyers. Because when you clearly know the measurements and how to look into it, you can really understand what are the buyers looking for and how we feel like as a buyer when you step into the unit, so that this will affect you when you sell in future. For example, today if you are a buyer and you go into a room that is maybe, for example, they say it's a 8 or 9 square meter, but the measurements of the room may not be exactly how it is, you will still feel that it is very cramped. Or the living room, it can be very long, it can be very short. All these little measurements will determine how the buyers feel. This impression of the buyers will determine how much they are willing to pay for this unit going forward as well. Next, I'll be going through deep down into the measurements of the unit so that you can clearly understand what I meant by the size itself. A lot of buyers actually focus just on like the size of 743 or 678 or 10 square meter or 9 square meter. But like what I mentioned, we want to understand how does this really impact you as a buyer or a seller going forward. We now look at these two different layouts in detail and understand clearly what is the main difference of these two layouts. So we can see, let's say for example, we take the master bedroom. You can see that the width is 2008 while the length is 3006. Comparing to Emerald of Katong is 2007 versus 3006. So what I'm trying to tell you is that because here is longer than here, you have to understand it's not so much about just 13 square meter versus maybe 10 square meter. It is more of the measurement that we have to take note. For example, if we look at another one, the common bedroom, there is 2006 and 2009 versus Emerald of Katong, which is 2005 and 3250. Clearly, you can see that for Emerald of Katong, this part is much longer for a common bedroom. So the question that we have to ask ourselves today is that, is this more important to you or this more important to you? Because end of the day, some of the buyers might just feel that this is more important and they prefer this as compared to this. So the key thing to understand here is not so much of what is the size of the bedroom, but more of the measurement of the bedroom so that you can understand how is it going to be feeling like when you are staying inside the unit itself and how this will become a perception of the buyers in the market when they look at this unit. Another part that we want to look at is actually the living room area. So if you see, for example, Tembusu Grand, you're looking at 4,002 versus 5,005. And you can clearly see that for Emerald of Katong, there is this study area here that actually integrates together with the living and dining area. So why is this very important? Because if you see for Tembusu Grand, you have a wall over here and there's a little small gap over here. This gap here can be slightly tighter and this might be a little concern in terms of the view. So you just imagine yourself, if today you were to collect the keys and visually the unit itself feels bigger. For example, if you walk into Emerald of Katong and you have this big open space followed by your living area, the feel that you get for this unit is definitely bigger compared to Tembusu Grand. So when it comes to resale property, the most important thing is the feel of the unit. Why? Because as a buyer, the perception of this unit will determine how much I'm willing to pay going forward. For example, once I go in, what I feel, these are the things that truly matters when it becomes a resale property. And we have to be very careful because this will determine whether or not your current property will it be able to sell easier or harder in the market. So in this comparison, if you can look at it, it's very clear that Emerald of Katong has a better layout as compared to Tembusu Grand. So the key question we have to ask ourselves is today, if I'm a Tembusu Grand owner, when do I need to sell? Do I need to exit before they are going to be launched? Why? Because this will definitely cause an impact to my sales and I might be in a situation that I'll be stuck and not able to sell my property as a Tembusu Grand owner. The next thing that we also want to understand is the price of both of them, because this is a crucial factor in determining whether or not when should we be selling and should we be even letting go our unit as an owner. And now we look at the prices of both of the developments. You can see for Tembusu Grand, the highest that they bought is around 1.9 to 2 million, while Emerald of Katong, when it's launched 1 year later, it is bought as low as 1.7 million. You can also see clearly that the PSF that they bought is even lower than Tembusu Grand. So it really doesn't mean that harmonized project means that the PSF will be higher. It really depends on the size and the price that the developer is launching to determine whether or not the PSF is it lower. But what I'm trying to tell you over here is that if you see the price difference for these two projects is about 300,000. All I can say is that with this big gap of price difference, there might be a very big concern when these Tembusu Grand owners wants to exit during this point of time when these units are being launched in the market, which is when their SSD is up. So more importantly is not to focus so much on the overall size or the PSF of the unit. What is more important is like what I mentioned to you just now, the measurements of the unit and how does it appeal to the buyer going forward. So it's not so much about the per square feet or the square meter that I'm paying. It's more of whether the feel of it, does it make sense to me? And if I can get it at an even cheaper deal, I definitely will go for something that I like, that is cheaper, and also it makes sense in terms of the layout. And another thing to note that you can see from here, Emerald of Katong bought at 1.7 million. Even if they have to sell at $2 million, they still make a good profit of $200,000 to $300,000. So what is the benefit or the advantage for Tembusu Grand owners? The biggest advantage that they have today is that they have already cleared their seller stamp duty and they're able to sell. So if today you're a Tembusu Grand owner and you know that there's an opposite condo that is going to come out harmonized, better layout, definitely you will want to exit, because when these units all come out into the market together, they are going to be your competitors and they are going to be one of those people that will challenge you in terms of the sales. That's why you have to know clearly who are your competitors in your location to really determine whether or not should you be selling or can you be holding on to your property. Now I'll share about some of the current situation that is happening in the market. If you can look at Amor Residences, their 3-bedroom 958 square feet is sold at 2.4 to 2.5 million. While Penrith is in an RCR location, 936 square feet selling at 2.4 to 2.5 million. So what I'm trying to tell you here is that if today you are an owner in Amor Residences with this size 958 and this selling price, you can easily upgrade to Penrith, which is a RCR location and is also at the same price. So why is this happening is because the harmonization thing is coming out. So you can see clearly, even if it's 936, definitely this 936 layout is much better than this 958. Why do I say that? Is because 936 square feet is harmonized, 958 is non-harmonized. And if you do the math and you do the calculation, actually this 936 square feet is much bigger in terms of the overall livable area as compared to a 958 square feet. But of course, we still need to go down into the detail like what I mentioned to you in terms of the measurement, whether or not this 936 square feet truly makes sense when you go into this unit. So another example I want to share with you is Amor Residences, same one, but now we look at a bigger 3-bedroom that is selling at 2.7 million. And if you can see, Springleaf Residences, a 4-bedroom, 1227 square feet is going at 2.4 million. One key thing to note is that, first thing, you can from a 3-bedroom upgrade to a 4-bedroom. Second thing, of course, Springleaf Residences is not the best location. Ang Mo Kio, sometimes people feel that it's still better. But what I'm trying to tell you today is that if you are able to upgrade from a 3-bedroom to a 4-bedroom at a lower price and have reserve funds, isn't it something that is worth considering if today you are in this situation? I'm just using this as an example, but definitely there are some places that also has similar attributes and you can take advantage of this in terms of the market today. That's why you can see in today's market, there is a lot of launches that is sold very well. Why? Because a lot of owners are in this situation that they are able to, from a 3-bedroom, upgrade to a 4-bedroom without topping up and even have a lot of reserve funds to make this upgrade. One of the biggest questions I want to discuss in my video today is whether or not you have to sell your property if you are in a non-harmonized project. So like what I mentioned to you just now, if today you know that your surrounding projects that are coming out are harmonized projects, then you must be very careful. What is the land cost that these projects are being bought and how much averagely are they going to sell? Because this will determine whether you as an owner in a non-harmonized project should you be selling. I take for example Thomson Reserve. Expectedly is going to launch averagely about 2008 PSF, and if you look at the average of 2008, normally a developer will launch probably about 25, 26 starting price to make the average of 2008. But the question we have to ask ourselves is like, for example, in Thomson Reserve, your nearby properties are maybe about 6, 7, 8 years old. So the question is that if today Thomson Reserve is going to be launched at this price and this size, what is the price going to roughly be at? If, for example, Thomson Reserve price is going to be a very huge gap from your resale property, then definitely it's not a big concern. Why? Because you know that there is a very big gap in pricing and buyers that has a certain budget, they will still consider the resale options in the location if they really want to stay there. But if today, for example, you are in a project A and just beside you, project B is going to launch as a harmonized project that is maybe just going to be launched in the next 3 months away from yours, then this is something you have to be very careful of. For example, just now the scenario that we talked about, Emerald of Katong versus Tembusu Grand, the age of the property between both of them are not very far, and buyers will definitely compare because the age of the project is very near and their prices are also quite similar in terms of the purchase price. I use a very live example today to explain to you what was I trying to say previously. I'll be using this example Lentor Modern for you to have a better understanding. So if you see today's Lentor Modern prices for a 980 square feet at $2.4, $2.5 million. A 980 square feet in Lentor Modern is a 3+ flexi. Means they have 3 bedrooms with a flexi room that you can do a storeroom or a helper's room if you want to. But the key thing to note that it is a non-harmonized project at 980 square feet. If you convert it to a harmonized plot, it will be around 910 square feet, going at 2.4, 2.5 million. So today as a resale owner, if you bought it at this price, you definitely want to sell around maybe 2.6 to 2.7 million. Then the next question you have to ask yourself is, today, my buyer that is going to come in and buy at 2.6, 2.7 million, what options do I have? As a buyer, when I go to an area that has a 3-bedroom at this price, I will definitely want to look at the surrounding options. So we see today what is happening in the market and what are the prices at. If you know Lentor Garden Residences, they are going to be launched soon and their prices has been released by the developer. If you see clearly, the 3-bedroom compact and 3-bedroom premium, their sizes for harmonized project is from 872 all the way to 1012. But the key thing and the very important thing that we want to understand now is the price they are releasing at. If you see, it's from 1.8 million all the way to 2.4 million. So what I'm trying to say is that from 1.8 to 2.4 million, you can buy a compact 3-bed all the way to a premium 3-bed. Remember just now when I mentioned to you about landlord modern, as a buyer when I come in, or as a seller when I want to sell at 2.7 million, me as a buyer, I have 2.7 million budget, I have a lot of options. Then the question is that over here, they're also going to sell at 2.4 million. In future, they might sell 2.7, 2.8 million. So you have to ask yourself today, as a buyer, when I have this budget and I want to come in, will I do a comparison between landlord modern versus landlord garden residences? Definitely I will do. But another difference a lot of people will be saying is that landlord modern is right at the MRT, is a better location. Not wrong, totally agree. So if today you are a buyer that only wants to buy on top of MRT or very near MRT, your first priority surely is go to landlord modern. But today if you are a buyer that you are open, you may not need the MRT, you are able to walk just a 5 minutes walk to the MRT, and you prefer something that is newer, will you turn and consider something that is beside you that is newer at the same price with a better layout? So these are the key things that we want to understand, because this will definitely affect you. Why I bring out this example is for you to clearly understand, because your neighbor is coming out as a harmonized project, it will definitely affect you in terms of the pricing. So today, if I'm a landlord modern owner, I really might consider, what should I be doing with my property? Should I be swapping to something bigger? Should I be going out of this area? Or should I be buying into something that I can still benefit in terms of my exit going forward? The most important thing in property purchase is really to understand, can we exit? Are we safe in terms of our purchase? These are the main two things I always highlight to my buyers so that you are protected when you buy a property. So to sum up everything for today, the most important thing that we want to understand is the risk of holding on to a new pre-harmonized project. For example, Emerald of Katong versus Tembusu Grand, or landlord modern versus landlord garden residences. This is the key thing that we want to understand, because when you have a neighboring project that is coming out, you have to be very careful. Especially you have to know the land price that they are bought in at, what is their average break-even price, what is their launch price, so that you can plan for your own unit whether or not should you be letting go, because this will definitely affect you. When the supply goes up in the location, it will affect, because buyers will compare, and this is very normal in the resale market. The next thing that we want to also understand is that the quantum the buyer is paying for. End of the day, in Singapore's market, a lot of buyers still very price sensitive, and if the amount is within their range, then they will compare. The next thing is the layout, whether or not this layout suits me, whether or not it looks better, whether or not I feel better about the layout. If the price is affordable, I will still definitely consider, because it is a very big amount that we are looking into. And last but not least, we want to understand this thing as well, that even though it's a higher PSF at some situations, it might be a better layout, and it might also work better in terms of your exit, because the livable area is something that is very different in today's layout. And when the buyer, when they come in, they collect the keys, they feel that it's so good, they will still be willing to pay a bit more in terms of the prices. And this is how you can guarantee a safer exit when you are marketing your property as a harmonized project. But of course, there are also projects, even though it's harmonized, the layout is not as ideal. So what we want to understand is, like what I mentioned to you just now, we want to really go deep to understand the measurements, the feel of the unit. How does this size, this length, this breadth really matters in terms of your stay or your exit when you want to sell this property. With that, I come to the end of the video today about Harmonize. If you have any questions about the recent projects, whether or not their layout, their measurements do make sense, that you can stay carefully, stay properly, stay comfortably, the most importantly, just scan my WhatsApp, text me, drop me a text, let me know your questions. Or you can also join my Telegram community, where I'll be sharing a lot of my videos and all of my insights over there. But the main key thing that I want to highlight to you is that if today you have any concerns on some of the layouts that you are quite puzzled with, or you are unsure how to determine whether this layout really makes sense for your purchase, just feel free to WhatsApp me. Or if you have any questions that you want to know, any content, any topics that you all want to find out, feel free to just WhatsApp me, and I'll readily shoot a content for you to let you have a clearer understanding how to position yourself as a buyer or seller in today's market. Thank you.